and welcome to another segment of Lawton's Law. I'm Larry Carter, and I'll be sitting in for Larry tonight, who's out of town. Tonight we have a couple of guests here. We have a former sergeant with the City of Melbourne Police Department, Blake Lanka, and we have the publisher and owner of Brevard's Best News, Dana Lloyd. Welcome both of you. Thank you for appearing.
Thank you for having me.
Let's get right down to why we're here. I said former Melbourne police officer. Can you give me a little bit of background as to when you started, the academy you went to, and how you progressed through the City of Melbourne Police Department to become a sergeant?
I went to the police academy in 1996. At that time, it was Brevard College. In 1997, I went ahead and I worked for the City of Melbourne Village. I worked there for about a year and a half. Then in 1998, I went ahead and got employed with the City of Melbourne, and I worked with the Melbourne Police Department.
Okay, so you started with the City of Melbourne Village, which is a very small town.
Yes, sir.
And then you transitioned over to the City of Melbourne.
That's correct.
Okay, and then where'd you go from there?
I started in 1998, and up until 2011, I worked in patrol. Then in 2011, I went into the traffic unit. I became a traffic homicide investigator. And in 2012, I went ahead and I got promoted to the rank of sergeant.
Okay.
In 2015, I then went ahead and had additional responsibilities added on. I became the canine sergeant, and I became the field training sergeant, and I also became an instructor within the police department.
Okay, when you say field training sergeant, for our audience, what does that entail? What does that mean?
I oversee the field training officers that were on my squad.
So you were actually in charge of the people that did the training for the new officers coming into the police department?
On my squad.
On your squad?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Recently, there's been some changes. Can you tell us a little bit about what happened there?
As of last Thursday, my employment was terminated.
Okay. And why were you terminated?
For a bunch of reasons, one being sexual harassment, honesty, and a few other things, the allegations that were made against me.
Okay. For the sake of our audience, I've known you for the whole entire 17 years that you've been with the police department now. And I have to admit, I Googled your name. And I came up with a lot of things. I came up with Blake Lanka, the City of Melbourne sergeant, fired for racism, sexism. There was a whole lot of things there. Blake, how do you feel that the investigation went, and how do you feel that you need to defend yourself now?
The investigation was not fair and impartial. It was definitely one-sided. Once the allegations went ahead and came out, and the complainant went ahead and played the race card and the sexism card and everything else, you know as well as I do, once those cards come out, there's not a whole lot you can go ahead and really do. At that time, I was already predetermined as being guilty, okay, and it was just downhill from there.
Now, I'm a retired police officer, and 17 of those 30 years that I was a police officer, I taught, as you know, in the academy, I taught diversity training. In fact, you may have gone through some of my sessions.
I did.
I hope you learned something through my sessions, and that's why it surprised me when I read these allegations that you were being terminated for all these different reasons. Dana, you got involved with this. How did you get involved?
I got involved because I received a phone call from another former Melbourne officer who was given the same title, if you will, of being, his actually was more of just being a straight up racist.
Okay.
And asked me to look into Blake's case.
Okay.
I then reached out to Blake and met with him for several hours on our first meeting, and I'm just as dumbfounded today as I was the first time meeting him, going through the documentation of what they have done to him.
Okay, and being an investigative reporter, you've got quite a bit of experience in this, and so you're not easily swayed one way or the other. You're looking for facts, okay? What facts did you find? I mean, to back up these claims that this man's a racist and a sexist and a homophobe and everything else?
Interestingly enough, I didn't find anything. It appears to me, and what my interpretation was, that this department, agency, if you will, the first words that came to my mind was this was a witch hunt. So then I was determined to find out, what did he do? This is not about Blake being a racist or being a sexist. This is about Blake made somebody mad. Okay. And we're not talking just general. I've seen so many times where if somebody in a department or somebody in an agency, if they think that person's not what their termination of a team player is, then there's just attacks that are made. And this was just such a personal attack. You said that you were with Melbourne Police Department for a very long time. Being in the position that you were, I guess, if it's okay, I would like to ask you a question. And that would be, how would somebody in such in a leadership position promote him? Blake clearly stated that in 2012, he moved up and became a trainer. A person just doesn't wake up one morning and say, well, today I'm going to be a racist and a sexist. Why did they continue to move him up the ranks, if you will, and then turn around in 2015 and say, oh, wait, all of a sudden, no, now you're this? If that's what he is, or if that's what he was, why wasn't that caught?
When did this investigation start?
Approximately 3 months ago.
Three months ago.
Yes, sir.
Okay. And during that 3 month period, were you suspended, or were you left on duty, or?
I was put on leave with pay.
You put on leave with pay. Now, was there a specific allegation? In other words, who were the complainants? Without calling names, did they have complainants?
They did.
Okay.
This started when I had one of my employees that was going ahead and making minor policy violations, just minor mistakes, okay? This employee was newer. She was there for about just under 2 years, and she was just making minor mistakes. I would go ahead and I would document the mistakes, and I would go ahead and try and retrain her with some of the things that were going ahead and going on.
Which is a supervisor's?
My responsibility. Absolutely. At which time, I started noticing a pattern of her going ahead and not telling the entire truth of some of the things. At first, maybe it was just a misunderstanding. And then the next time it happened, you still go ahead and you give them the benefit of the doubt. But when it happened the third time, I started going, well, there's a problem here. There's started to be a pattern of untruthfulness that's going ahead and coming out with a certain employee. I went ahead and went to another supervisor, and he noticed the same type of pattern and the same type of things. So he actually started documenting that via notes or some type of counseling and stuff like that, which can be looked into. When the lieutenant found out, and we reported everything to the lieutenant, he went ahead and called her into the office to go ahead and discuss the incident with her, at which time he asked her, is there a reason, what's going on, tell me something.
Now, when did we get to the point of, I guess this was the sexual harassment complaint?
It didn't start that way.
Okay.
Okay. What it started out as was that I was going ahead and I was making comments. I was going ahead and harassing her.
Okay, tell me what were the comments?
They were basically making fun of her because she was going ahead and she was getting married.
Okay.
In our squad meetings, basically we have a culture of using off-color humor and everything else.
Okay.
I had 2 people that were going ahead and they were dating each other on the squad, getting married, engaged, and everything else.
Okay.
Comments were being made like, oh, how long is this going to last? Let's go ahead and take bets, because unfortunately, in the real world, and you know this as well as I do, okay, marriages don't last in law enforcement. Okay, so we were going ahead and it was just off-color humor that we were going ahead and using. Everybody participated in the squad. Even her fiance went ahead and participated by saying, oh, she doesn't cook, she doesn't clean.
At any point, did somebody approach you and say, I'm offended?
No, sir.
In the squad meetings, I want this to stop. At any time did that happen?
No, sir.
Okay.
And I took 3 independent polygraphs to go ahead and support what I went ahead and said.
Okay. You took polygraphs?
Yes, because once, let's back up and we'll get into that in a minute. When we went ahead and the lieutenant was going ahead and talking to her, he asked her, is there anything else that was going on? She says that this off-color humor and that was going on bothered her, and that was the reason for this to happen. He asked her if there's anything else that was going ahead and bothering her, whether that could be sexual harassment, racism, or anything along those lines. She said no. Okay. He called me into the office, dismissed her, called her into the office, and went ahead and asked me about it. I explained to him what was going on and everything else. He ordered me to go ahead and stop, okay, which I understood. Okay, because at that point in time was the first time I was told that this was going ahead and this was actually bothering her.
Okay, so at what point were you informed that there was an issue or a problem?
When I was in the lieutenant's office. That was the first time that I was aware that there was actually a problem with the situation.
Okay, and what were you told? I mean, were you told there was an allegation, an official allegation made against you, or if this was just preliminary?
It was preliminary. Basically, he was saying that this is not the type of humor that he wanted going on in the squad meeting anymore. He was a new lieutenant to the squad, okay, and he wanted to go ahead and make changes and use it as a training experience.
Okay.
Okay, and I had absolutely no problem.
Now, was that documented?
Yes, it is.
Okay.
Okay, notes were put in my file. Okay, and then more than likely what would happen is they would go ahead and document my evaluation that he had to speak to me about this and everything else, which is fine. I understand that. Okay. The next day comes around. The complainant goes ahead and goes to my partner, who's another sergeant, asks what happened to me, if I was disciplined. He explained to her what had gone ahead and happened. She was unhappy with the results of Lieutenant Molster's the investigation or the inquiry into what went ahead and happened. And from there, she went ahead and called some friends that she knew that I had problems with, previous employees and somebody else. And she went down to City Hall and went ahead and made embellished her complaint and went ahead and turned it into sexual harassment, racism, everything else.
Okay, we're going to be coming up on a break now, but when we come back, I want to get into a little bit more detail. That's the sexual harassment part of it, but I'd like to hear about the racism, how that came about. And then we're going to continue with Dana and see what she's done through her investigation. We'll be back in a minute.
My grandson T always tells me I worry about him too much. Well, I was sick with worry when he came home from Afghanistan, because he came home wounded. Not a wound you could see. It was post-traumatic stress disorder. My T couldn't sleep. He was angry all the time. Then I heard about Wounded Warrior Project. Now, I don't know everything they do, but my T is smiling again.
1 out of every 5 warriors return from the battlefield with post-traumatic stress disorder. Help support them at woundedwarriorproject.org.
Welcome back to our show. Before we left, Blake, we were talking about an incident, but to move things forward a little bit, there was allegations of not only sexism, but also racism. This dealt with one of the black officers, I assume.
Yes, sir.
But I'd like to ask Dana. Dana, you've done some investigations. What are some of the questions that you have once you saw what was in the investigative report?
Well, one of the questions I found interesting, first of all, I want to say that it was extremely interesting how quickly Melbourne finished up this investigation. It talks that they interviewed, this is their quote, they interviewed some 72 witnesses. To me, that was...
72 witnesses?
Yep, it doesn't say exactly, just says some 72 witnesses.
Okay.
So I felt like they were doing like a big reach around. Did you take that from your report? Like they were going back? This isn't anything that happened in the 2-3 months of this ongoing investigation. Do you think that they stepped outside the box and they went far back?
When it happened, they only planned on interviewing 12 or 13 people. Mm-hmm. And they were people that were associated, that were friends, and people who had things to gain from this investigation. Then they went ahead and, because at that time I only knew the allegation to go ahead and be how I treated subordinates. Okay, at which time I made the request to go ahead and interview the rest of these people. Okay, that's how they came up with that number. So when they say 72 people, the over 2/3 of them are actually something I went ahead and requested.
Okay, with that being said, we all know that the results of the investigation are public record.
Correct.
So just for my peace of mind, this is one of the questions that I would like you to answer for the audience. This is the allegation. You ordered a female subordinate officer to perform calisthenics during a training session in front of an all-male class and then perform CPR on a mannequin.
What I was trying to do was go ahead and elevate our heart rate and get her a little bit stressed out and everything else to go ahead and simulate a real environment of going to a scene where somebody goes ahead and needs CPR. And to show everybody that stress takes an impact on your technique and everything else, and you forget your numbers and all that other stuff. She wanted to be a field training officer. Okay, our field training officers do demonstrations, so she was asked to go ahead and demonstrate that in front of class. That's it.
Okay.
Once she did that,